Hi everyone watching live. Thank you for joining the Center for Justice and Law Spotlight Conversation series, where we talk about topics on health, justice, and law with guests. I'm Tyler,
And I'm Lexi.
and we are both students in the Health, Justice, and Advocacy class this semester. We are partnering with the Center for Justice and Law today. Our Spotlight conversation will focus around the topic of sexual violence prevention, art activism, and advocacy, with the overarching theme of immigrant/migrant health issues. Our conversation today was with Toinette Battle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, we've asked you to join us today because of your unique experience in supporting victims of sexual violence, and we thought that your perspective would be important in people learning more about this topic. You have so much experience working with youth, seeing the juvenile justice system firsthand, and serving your community as a whole. Can you tell us more specifically about the work you are doing for your community and how it connects to sexual violence prevention and/or healing?
Yes, I certainly can. So basically, the work that I have worked in for many years is I've worked specifically with sex trafficking, which is a part of sexual violence. And sex trafficking is kind of, my passion really as I've grown in my profession of over 20, 25 years. And it's a huge problem in our world today. It goes as far back to like the 1960s, and that's just documented. I'm sure that it went back further than that. That there wasn't being documented at that time, and plus new laws and legislation have come out. But that's kind of a little bit of how I have kind of integrated that into my life and my passion for doing this work.
Thank you for sharing that. What or why did you originally get into this work, and what was your journey into finding this as something you would like to do?
Yeah, I got into this work really. I was introduced into sex trafficking really, and when I was working for corrections, I worked for Ramsey County Juvenile Detention Center and met some uh, young ladies that came through the juvenile detention center that had gotten involved in sex trafficking. And that was really my first introduction of hearing about that. Knew that it existed, but really upon meeting them and hearing their stories, that was kind of the catalyst that started me on this journey. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, I really got entrenched in working closely with victims and survivors of the sex trafficking industry to help them to get out of the life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's very important work, and thank you for doing what you do. Given the importance of this work, it can probably, I imagine, be physically, mentally, and emotionally taxing, kind of hearing stories and kind of hearing that trauma of survivors. So we wanted to know, how do you practice self-care and sustainability to keep yourself healthy so you're able to continue to do this important work and also just live your life and be happy?
Yeah, I will have to say that that is such an important question, number one, because in doing this work, you really do have to take care of yourself. You can get what is called vicarious trauma, which is kind of like secondary trauma that happens. It means that you haven't experienced the trauma yourself, but you hear stories all the time of other people's trauma, and then that can get passed on to you. And so we really have to take care of ourselves in this business. I am a therapist by profession first, so I this is what I do every day as I see clients with various backgrounds and people that have experienced domestic violence as well. So the way I take care of myself is really I have a strong faith in God. My faith in God has really sustained me. I feel like having that higher power, having a belief in you know uh, just strong faith really helps me get through things. It helps me to release some of the negativity that I hear on a daily basis because I pray, I meditate, I read the Bible, and that just really kind of gives me peace of mind. If I didn't have that, I don't know what I would do. The other thing is that recently, a long time ago, I was exercising, and I recently started exercising again as well. And that really helps to relieve stress as well. Exercise is also just a great release of stress in anything you do, whether you're in sex trafficking or any other profession. So that's another thing that I do. And I just try to make sure I spend lots of time with my family and close friends to kind of balance, hearing all the tragic stories that I hear, and is, being around people that are, in a positive light.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What are the barriers that you personally face when it comes to advocating against sexual violence?
Oh, wow. What a great question. There's some of the barriers, I guess, that I have faced. One is sometimes it comes from the law, so legislation that is out. In Minnesota, they have recently made some changes to some of the legislation that when they pick up individuals that have been sex trafficked or sometimes commonly known as prostitutes, that they would charge them. Well, now the laws have changed so that they realize that the so-called prostitutes or people, victims or survivors of sex trafficking really are victims and survivors. And so they've changed the law so that they're not charging them with felonies and things like that, but they try to work with them and understand that they are victims, because really who they really need to get to is the people that are doing the sexual exploitation and people that are sex traffickers. So there's laws. It's not quite all the way there yet, but that is a barrier as one of the things. The other thing is that sometimes when I have met individuals that have been sex trafficked, and I'm talking to them and trying to provide services for them, they often think that they're not sex trafficked. They think that depending on how long they've been in the business, and there's some terms that I need to tell you guys first. Let me back up for a minute and give you guys some terms so you understand as I use them. So if I say the life means, it's a common term and it's referred to any individual that has been sex trafficked for a number of years. They call it, you're in the life. That's what it's called. And when they say they get out of the life, that means that they're not doing sex trafficking anymore. It's just something that's heard of. When I say a John is referred to as the person that is actually buying the individual that is being sex trafficked. So they're paying money to have sex. And really what the Johns are doing is they're acting out their fantasies, their sexual fantasies. And so they might come in a hotel room or motel room or in a car or whatever, and they say they want X, Y, and Z done, or they want to do this or do that or have this, person do this or that to them. And so they are paying for this service of sexual activity, basically. So that's what a John is. And then I'm sure everybody's heard the term pimp, sex trafficker, sexual exploiter. That's all kind of one and the same. And that is the person that is in control. They're kind of like the CEO of the business. So they're the ones that provide the girls, and it's not just girls, it's boys too, but they provide the product, so to say. They provide the people to be able to provide those services to the Johns. So let's see. And then another, a trick. A trick is just the act of sexual exploitation or sex trafficking. So a girl may say, she goes, well, I did 5 tricks today. It means that she had 5 different, she met with 5 different men or whoever, and did, perform some sexual activities with those men. And then the last term I want to give you guys is a bottom. So a bottom is usually when a sex trafficker really has a business going. They don't just have one girl. They might have 5. And I'm using girls right now, but it can be boys. It can be anyone. I just want to say that. But so let's say they have 5, young girls that they're, doing, using, or this is their business. And the bottom is the one person out of those 5 girls that's kind of in charge of the other girls. So the sex trafficker kind of needs like a point person, a point of contact to make sure the girls are doing what they're supposed to be doing. He might tell them, okay, you report back to me if anybody doesn't come back in on time, or if they're acting up at the house. They usually stay in a house together. You report back to me and let me know if this is going on. And so that bottom is that person. So now going back to your question of other barriers, some of the times the girls that get into this lifestyle initially, they don't think that they're being sex trafficked because they're groomed into this life. The sex trafficker goes and at first, when they first meet somebody, they buy them clothes. They go get their hair done. They might take them out to eat because they're hungry. They do all these nice things for them because they're setting them up. They're getting ready to manipulate them. And then after a while, maybe after a month or so, then they might say, hey, you know what? Man, I'm a little short of money. You think you might be able to do this trick for me? And if you do this for me, this will really help us out and, help us, have more money or whatever. And I can still do some things for you. And so they groom them into being sex trafficked. And so a lot of times in those early stages, girls don't think that they're being sex trafficked. They think they have a choice that, oh, he loves me. He cares about me. So that's a barrier too, in trying to fight against that and trying to help these girls not get caught up in that lifestyle. There's a lot of barriers, I guess, but that's one of them. And the main thing, I think the biggest barrier is, oh man, two barriers. One of the biggest barriers I feel is, number one, get it so that we can catch more of these sex traffickers, because they're the ones at the top that are making all the money. And later on, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of real life statistics of how much money maybe one sex trafficker can make. Okay. And the other thing is that we have got to find ways in society to be able to reach individuals that, let's say their dad's in prison, incarcerated. Let's say their mom is on drugs and that they're coming from a broken home and that they don't have supports. They're living on the streets. These are the kids that get sucked into this lifestyle are kids that that don't go to school all the time. They're tardy a lot. They're absent a lot from school. And how can we target those kids and make sure that we get them before the traffickers get them? Because that's what the traffickers prey on. They prey on individuals that have low self-esteem, that don't, think that they have, a way or a chance in life, that nobody cares about them. Their parents don't care where they are, what time they come in at night, that they're even going to school or studying, for an exam. We gotta bridge the gap some kind of way to be able to get those kids that are falling through the cracks. That's a barrier.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that a lot of the terms that you used, some of them I've never heard of, so I really appreciate kind of that background and stuff. It definitely helped me in understanding more about your work. Yeah, so the one thing that I wanted to ask you was, so obviously sexual violence, as you said, is kind of dismissed, ignored, especially when a victim kind of is of a marginalized identity or like falls through the cracks, kind of like you said. What is one thing or a couple of things you kind of wish the general public or our audience even watching knew about sexual violence or sex trafficking that could be kind of a misconception that's widely spread or something that maybe no one knows about?
Okay. I would say, well, one thing that, I kind of mentioned kind of like the terms that is used. But traffickers, as I mentioned, they target marginalized individuals. So people that are living in poverty, people, like I mentioned, that are coming from broken homes that don't have any support system. Maybe, an individual is living with, their grandma because the parents aren't around and the grandma has 6 kids that she's trying to take care of, and she's 70 years old and she's barely, she's got health problems or whatever. There's all these things that are going on. I will say that some of the populations that are targeted for sex trafficking, other than the marginalized, which is huge, that's just across the board. But there's the LGBTQ population; they're very targeted. And traffickers they're always looking at the dollar, the money. So if somebody says they're bisexual, hey, they can make twice as much money because they'll have sex with a woman and a man. So they look at that. They're looking at, this is a big, hey, I can get more money out of this individual. So they're often targeted. African American girls are targeted, and let's see, what else did I have down here? Just kind of just like I mentioned, poverty, being in poverty, not having access to education, things like that. The neighborhood, all those things, those all are contributed to them being trafficked more. Give me, and I guess the other thing too is this that traffickers, I want you to know that while traffickers can uh, target anybody that falls within a marginalized, kind of groups setting, but traffickers can also be anybody. Um, I wish, and I would love to maybe come back sometime and do a presentation with you guys about trafficking. But let me tell you this: traffickers can be a cheerleader. There was a cheerleader in Minnesota that she was kind of like a bottom, and she was going and getting other girls that she knew that she befriended and bringing them to a trafficker, and she was getting paid for that. She's still considered a victim and survivor herself because she's being forced to do that, but that was her job and that was her role. Priests can be traffickers, law enforcement, they can be traffickers. There are some that are involved in that, unfortunately. Women can be traffickers. There are still, believe it or not, brothels out. They have madams and they, bring women in and this is what they do and they run their business. College athletes. There was a big story about a college athlete that was a trafficker. Motel owners. A lot of trafficking happens sometimes at motels. Um, a pimp or sex trafficker, they might, make deals and stuff sometimes, and they, have some rooms that they have cut out for the weekend that, hey, this is where they're making extra money. So yeah, those are some of the important things that I would say fall into that.
I think it's really interesting how you point out how trafficker can be kind of in plain sight. How do you think more people can know about that kind of information, like within educational systems, schools? Do you think it should be taught in schools and educational systems?
Absolutely. What you guys are doing in this class that you have right now is awesome. I'm glad that this is getting the word out. It is being able to be spread among your classmates. And because a lot of times, if you're not sex trafficked, you might know somebody that would be sex trafficked. But another great way is in Minnesota, we have what is called, and I just made a transition in jobs actually recently, but there's the agency I used to work for, Cornerstone Advocacy Services. They have a program, a relative department called Day One, and Day One is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a hotline. It's a crisis line, and you can call that. It's 866-223-1111. 866-223-1111. And what they do is you can call in there and you can say, hey, there's a situation, or I know somebody that might be sex trafficked, and they will give you what is called a regional navigator. A regional navigator, there's 9 regional navigators in Minnesota, and every state has them. And you just need to find the regional navigator for your area. You can Google it. And when you find that regional navigator, then what you do is they have all kinds of resources that help individuals to get out of it. Now, one thing that we try to do in working with individuals that have been sex trafficked, because we don't know if they're out of the life yet or if they're still got like 1 foot in and 1 foot out, or where they are in the process, is that we never judge them. If they're still wanting to stay in there, it's a no judgment zone. So what you do is you offer them services, and if they want it, they take it. If they don't, they don't. If you say, hey, well, I'd like to see you again, and if they can, you set up an appointment. It might not be next week. These are not individuals that are going to come every Thursday at 3 o'clock. Their lives are upside down. They've had so much trauma in their lives that they're not going to probably be able to really do that. But let's say they come 3 weeks later. Let's say they were going to meet you next week at 2, but then they don't show up. Well, when they come back, we don't judge them. We don't say, hey, I thought you were coming at 2 o'clock. Why didn't you? Because we know that the life that they live is controlled by their trafficker. Their trafficker controls everything they do, when they get up, when they sleep, what chores they have to do, and listen. I should have said this at the beginning, and I apologize. As a therapist, I wanted to just say that as we're continuing, I know we're short on time here, but as we're continuing this conversation, this is a very heavy topic, and if anybody is triggered by some of the things that I say, I just want you to take care of yourself. If you need to step out, take a break away, please do that, because it is a very serious topic. It's a very heavy topic, but it does happen, and it needs to be brought to light so people understand and people can be a part of the process. But traffickers control these individuals. They will beat them. They get beaten if they don't bring in a certain amount of money every day. There's all kinds of things that happen. Some of the other agencies that work with sex trafficking is the Link. They're in Minneapolis. The Link was actually formed by two Vikings football players. I can't remember their names, but you can look on their page and it'll tell the story about them. But they're kind of like the gurus. All they do, the work that they do, is all about sex trafficking. There's Harriet Tubman agency, Family Partnership, Breaking Free. That's another agency. And there's Among. I'll give Tyler the name, but Among Partnership Association, I believe is what it's called. And they also have one for the Native American population, because Native Americans, that's another huge population that gets targeted and is sex trafficked a lot. In fact, I want to say they're the most sex trafficked. And one of the reasons that they're the most sex trafficked is because in Minnesota, we have tribal laws, and sex traffickers can come onto their reservations and they can sex traffic these women, and they won't get in trouble by the laws of the land because there's tribal laws that are there. So it's harder to get the sex traffickers because they're on tribal ground. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. But those are some of the resources. If you just don't know, call the Day One. You can, if you don't remember the number, just look it up. Day One in Minnesota, and they're open 24 hours a day. Call them. Find out your regional navigator. Now, the regional navigator, I did look it up for where you guys are in Hamline University. It would be the East Metro Regional Navigator. Remember, I said there's 9 regions in Minnesota, and the East Metro Regional Navigator is that person is housed out of the 180 Degrees agency, and their number is 612-813-5030. 612-813-5030. That's the regional navigator that will cover Hamlin and St. Paul, Ramsey County.
Thank you so much for all of those resources. We're actually going to do a kind of recap Instagram post that will be coming in the next week or two. So I think that we'll definitely put those resources on them, and we'll have people boost them. And I think that will be super great.
Cool. Thank you guys for having me come and talk to you. I love talking about this. If you ever want me to come back and do a presentation on sex trafficking that goes a little bit more in detail, I would love to do that. It's great. And can I just end with one little story? Okay.
Yes, I have one more question also. We have one more.
Okay, go ahead. Do your question first. Do your question.
I guess just overall, what type of advice do you give to youth, people who are in marginalized communities, just to how to protect themselves, how to protect others, and just advice to give with individuals who are experiencing sexual violence in any shape, way, or form, and what type of advice do you just give to them overall?
Sure. Of course, the advice would probably differ depending on where they're at and if they are currently being sex trafficked, or if they're, on the edge, or, could be potentially sex trafficked in the future. But one thing that I try to tell youth, because listen, people can be sex trafficked as early as like 12 years old, 10 years old even, can get into this lifestyle, unfortunately. So I try to tell them that there's nothing in life is free. There isn't. So when these men and whoever they are, men, women, whatever, that they're coming on and they're coming up and they're offering you things, they're offering you, to get your hair done for free, and they're not asking for anything in return, don't believe it. It's a trap. It is a trap. And I get it that when you're coming from a poverty, circumstance or neighborhood, and you haven't had nice things in life, and somebody buys you a new pair of Air Jordans, and somebody gives you a meal, you're kind of grateful and you're thankful and you feel like that person cares about you. But know for sure that they don't care about you. Yes, they are providing you a meal. Yes, they bought you some nice tennis shoes, but they don't care about you, and they're setting you up. They're preparing to groom you. But always know there's always a way out. There's always a way out, and that you can get that, and that, giving them just resources and things that they can call if they get in too deep and they realize that, oh man, I'm not going to listen to that lady right now. But then after something happens and they're like, man, what is that lady's number? Or who can I call? Then just providing them the resources that they can have. But I think that statistics say, I believe that if every young person has at least one person that is one person that's invested in them, that cares about them, it's definitely a way to break that cycle that they don't get caught up in something like this. They need at least one person. If you have two, it's even better. And if you have three, there's just no way that it'll happen. You will definitely not get into that, because you got three people that are holding you accountable, three people that know that they love you, that they care about you, that are invested in your future, that want you to succeed. You won't get caught up in that. And just like all of you here today, look at all of you. You're in college. You're doing something with your lives. You're, doing awareness, education awareness about prevention, about such important topics like this. Somebody's invested in your future. Somebody cares about you enough to send you to a private college to allow you to be able to get an education so that you can come back and help your community in some kind of way.
Thank you so much for sharing that and telling us how you feel and just being the person you are and doing the work that you do. So thank you for taking time out of your day to share your experiences with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Do you have time for me to tell one little quick story?
Sure.
Okay. I'll make it real quick, like 2 minutes, okay? So one lady that I met, I know a lot of individuals that have been sex trafficked. One lady that I met that was sex trafficked, she was a bottom, and she informed me that Monday through Thursday, that each woman was responsible to bring in $1,000 a day to their sex trafficker. And on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they were required to bring in 1,500. So do the math. So 1,000 a day for one woman is 4,000 for Monday through Thursday, right? And for Friday through Sunday, that's about $1,500 each day. So that's 4,500, and that would be $8,500 for one woman in 1 week. Now, in her house, there were 5 women, and 5 women bringing that much in is $42,500 a week that trafficker was getting for 5 women. And just think, I mean, that's somebody's salary in a week. That's somebody's salary for a year, that this trafficker is making. And sometimes a lot of these women get on drugs. This woman, she was using drugs. Sometimes the traffickers will buy drugs for the ladies because it's so traumatizing, so psychologically damaging that you can't handle it. And sometimes the Johns beat you up, and then if you don't bring enough money home, then your trafficker beats you up. And it's so damaging that sometimes you need to escape. And so that's why they use drugs. Some traffickers don't buy drugs for the women and don't want them to use drugs, because remember, this is taken out of their income that they're making. If they have to keep your drug habit, is they got to take money out of their 42,000, whatever they're making, if they have 8 girls, 10 girls, whatever. So I want to just say this. This is, and I looked at the statistics this morning again, it's $150 billion business. And it is the second largest criminal activity in the world. That's what I want to leave you with. But there is a way out.
Thank you so much for that story. And I feel like for a lot of us, at least for me, it kind of hit home. Like, that's just crazy how much these people are kind of broken down to kind of be skeletons of themselves and not even able to feel like they have autonomy over their own life and body. So just thank you so much for joining us and for your expertise, and I really appreciate it. I learned a ton, and I'm guessing that a lot of the audience did too as well. For the audience watching, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and tune in next week for a spotlight that will be centered around prison, birth, and justice. And thank you again for joining us, and thanks to everyone else for tuning in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In my honor. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.